while they're there, this is where kind of the story will start to diverge. Is while they're there for the happy ending, they start.
I was wondering if that phrase was going to get used at all. Just in case you didn't know, I'm Matthew.
And I'm Brian.
And we're sitting here parked because it's raining right now. So we're going to take a short break from the actual road trip as we talk about the Hookman episode of Supernatural.
I'm kind of hooked on this episode.
So spoilers up ahead.
We'll also be discussing the urban legend behind the Hookman.
All right, buckle up and let's sit right here. Our episode opens up with the Theta sorority in Eastern Iowa University. We have two of our characters, Lori and Taylor, as Lori's getting ready for a night out, and Taylor's kind of, talking to her like, no, don't wear that, wear this instead. And so she convinces her to change clothes, and then she goes out for a date with her boyfriend, Rich. Side note, Rich and Sam used to be buddies in Gilmore Girls. From what I hear. I've never actually watched it, but
yeah,
that's what I hear anyways.
Sorry, Gilmore Girls watchers. We probably won't be recapping that one.
Not today, anyways.
Not today.
Anyways, as Lori is leaving, Taylor gives her the line of, don't do anything I wouldn't do. And it's like, well, that doesn't leave much out, type of thing. So kind of setting up that Taylor's more of like, she likes to push the limits.
A little rowdy.
Yeah. So we have Lori and Rich, they park under a very familiar looking bridge for those that are longtime watchers of Supernatural. If you're recapping with us right now and this is your first time going through it, you'll probably see this bridge again. I'm pretty sure Mary's dad dies right at that bridge also.
Spoiler alert.
Yeah. Anyways, so I guess if you are just watching it with us, skip that part.
Yeah.
From here, as they park under the bridge, we see, the Hookman off in the shadows. And then we get a bit of, kind of like no means no. Rich is trying to push things. Lori's not having it. And then there's, the scratching sound. Rich goes to investigate, classic, like, urban legend of the Hookman. Mixed with him disappearing, her trying to figure out what's going on. She goes out and he's hanging from the tree and his hand is scratching the roof of the vehicle. Little things don't line up with the urban legend, like, he punctures the tires, stuff like that.
Yep.
So we cut to Sam and Dean. They're kind of at a dead end. Sam can't find any trace of their father anywhere, and Dean, meanwhile, is looking up potential cases, and he finds one over in Iowa, so they decide to go and check it out. It was noted that Rich was a frat boy, so they go to the fraternity and they claim to be transfers from Ohio, and that, that they're the new roommates. And so from there they do some investigating and find out that, he was seeing the Reverend's daughter. So they go to the church to like the funeral service to kind of investigate further. From here they get a chance to talk to Lori, and Sam is able to relate because he's still dealing with the death of Jessica and everything, and so he knows what it's like to have someone close to you that's passed away in a supernatural fashion.
Oh, she doesn't know yet.
Right. But she does kind of, based on what she's talked to the police and everything, she's like, oh, I'm kind of crazy because, there's no way that this could have happened. And right away, they're pretty convinced that, it sounds a lot like the Hookman legend. So Sam and Dean go to do some research to figure out, what this could be specifically. So they're looking for something that could match as just a spirit. And they find out back in 1862, there was a preacher that went around basically Jack the Ripper style, didn't like the red light district, and so he went around just murdering up a storm. And he had lost his hand and became, Captain Hook, and was going around hooking the hookers. And
no, Matthew. No.
Anyways, his popular hunting ground was on 9 Mile Road, which was where Rich had died. And so they think that there's a connection there. After the research, Dean congratulates Sam with a nice job there, Dr. Venkman.
Mm-hmm.
Kind of a call back to Ghostbusters.
Dig it.
And then we cut to another scene with Lori and her dad kind of talking, and he doesn't really approve of her, like, with the sorority and everything. He doesn't like the sororities. They're kind of immoral. And so we're getting a little bit of a hint there. We cut to Sam and Dean going to 9 Mile Road to go on a ghost hunt, basically. So this is our first example where we see them using rock salt with the shotguns to use to repel spirits. So, you know, they're literally hunting for a spirit at this point. But they find the police instead. We cut back to Lori, you know, and Taylor, her roommate, and Taylor doesn't survive the night. And, you know, Lori wakes up with the whole blood on the wall, aren't you glad you didn't turn on the light type thing, which, to my knowledge, isn't necessarily a Hookman thing. That's more of another urban legend. But,
yeah, that one's more of just like a campfire story moment. Still, creepy part in the episode.
It is. And side note, headcanon going in again, Taylor got herself a fast track through Hell Pass, and within a year comes back as a Crossroads demon.
I actually think I know which Crossroads demon you're even...
The Crossroads demon.
Yeah.
That shows up when we first are introduced to Crossroads demon. Taylor was played by Christy Lang, and she appears again in Crossroad Blues, which is 1 year and 1 episode later, basically. So it's the 8th episode of the 2nd season.
Oh, dang.
Yeah. So I found that kind of interesting. And I did confirm that is who she played. I'm fact-checking these now. We cut back to Sam and Dean as Dean was able to get Sam's charges dropped to just a fine because he's freaking Matlock.
Yeah.
According to him, anyways. And basically, it's one of those, like, truth is stranger than fiction, so he just was like, no, he was hunting ghosts and they're repelled by rock salt. That's what we were doing. He's a dumbass fraternity pledge. Like, they believe that? Well, you look like a dumbass fraternity pledge.
Yep.
So they're able to, once again, kind of get away from the...
Skirt the law a little bit.
Yeah. From here, they notice a little bit of activity at the police station, and they find out that Taylor had died. So they go to investigate the death there, and the location's not matching up. This isn't 9 Mile Road. They see the aren't you glad you didn't turn on the lights, and they also see a symbol written below it, which is the symbol from the hook from the preacher Jacob Carnes that they had researched earlier. One thing about this episode is they do state that the aren't you glad you didn't turn on the lights is classic Hookman, which, as we were just talking about, seems to not be classic Hookman, but, you know, again, you gotta make the episode.
Every urban legend is going to be a little bit different.
So with them confirming that it is Jacob Carnes is the one that is basically being this Hookman, they do some research and find out that he was buried in an unmarked grave.
It's going to make it hard for hunters to figure out.
They also notice that Lori is connected somehow. Like, it's not necessarily the location. Hookman seems to be following her, so some sort of a connection there. As they did more research, they found out that, you know, these killings kind of followed religious people. So over the years, there were other, like, preachers, reverends, or whatever, where there were a series of murders that kind of got linked to them, even though they claimed, no, it wasn't me, it was the one-armed man with the hook for the other hand. The main thing is just these people were speaking out against immorality. And so potential here, they're like, oh, well, it's got to be the dad, you know, the reverend. He's speaking out against immorality, and so knew that Rich was whatever Rich was, and Taylor was pushed things too far. So
I mean, Rich could have even just been like, yeah, he's the boyfriend. I'm not exactly fond of him just yet because he's a frat boy.
Could be.
Yeah.
Sam stays to watch over Lori to make sure that she's going to be okay, and Dean goes to look for the unmarked grave, which is marked with the symbol from Jacob Carnes. So that...
Well, I guess you could, if it's not like officially marked, like he's not actually in a graveyard kind of a thing.
Well, he was in a graveyard though. It was an unnamed grave, but it was marked. So I just want to point that out. there was a mark on this grave.
Just unnamed.
At first, like, Dean goes out to, he's like, I'm going to go find this grave. And I'm like, but if it's unmarked, how are you going to know that's the right grave? Turns out it was marked, so he wins this round.
Yeah.
Lori catches Sam kind of spying in on her, comes out to talk to him, and, he's still relating to her because, he's dealt with the death of Jessica, and that's still kind of a thing. And she tries to take things a little bit further, but he's like, I just can't. Like, I still am dealing with this.
She, however, rebounded quick.
She's not as used to dealing with this death and stuff. She just needs some comfort.
Man, sometimes these, like, romance plot lines that will happen are just not in great taste.
Anyways, we cut back to the graveyard with the unmarked marked grave, and we finally, for the first time, episode 7, we finally see them salt and burn something.
Yep.
And it doesn't work. So it's during this time, as we cut back to Sam and Lori, we find out that the preacher is actually having an affair with a married woman at the church. And, he's kind of a hypocrite as he's talking out about all these immoral things. And look who's Mr. Immoral himself. And so, Hookman then shows up because salt and burning the bones didn't do anything. And he gets attacked. Yeah. Sam helps to kind of like fight him off and everything, and then we see that, Dad's in the hospital, and now, police are kind of looking at Sam here because they've already dealt with him hunting ghosts up by 9 Mile Road. Now he's involved where, they already kind of suspect Lori is being involved with these murders, and now all of a sudden her dad was attacked and Sam's corroborating, so police are kind of
a little suspicious.
Yeah, they're not a big Sam fan right now. So here we find out that it may not just be the bones that are part of it, because the hook was part of him. That was his other hand. Mm-hmm. So if the hook is still around, then that would still potentially leave him something to latch onto. So they go to find that, and they find out that the hook was reforged into other things. So they go back to the church to just find anything silver, and they're going to burn it. But silver doesn't burn, it just melts. And melting it, wouldn't they have done that when they reforged it?
It might just be like the act of,
My thoughts. Because I happened upon this while I was doing research for the episode. That was like a complaint against it. Dean throws salt in the fire before he throws the stuff in there. So maybe that's the key. If you're going to reforge stuff, throw salt in the fire just in case there's a ghost attached to what you're reforging.
Okay. Might just purify the fire. And
yeah, holy fire.
Yeah, there you go.
In the process of trying to melt down all this stuff, Lori shows up, and she's kind of blaming herself for all these deaths because she realizes, like, I found these people immoral, and now they're dead. Like, it's my fault. I'm the one who should be punished. And Hookman's like, gotcha. So he shows up to punish.
Yeah,
to punish Lori, and it's around here that they find out that she's wearing a necklace made of silver that was from the church, which is where the hook had made its way back to because he used to be a preacher. So Dean Batmans himself in again, shows up at the right moment to save the day. They do a nice little handoff where Dean throws the shotgun and shells to Sam, and he throws the necklace to Dean. He runs off to melt the necklace, gets it just in time, melts it away. That's the end of the Hookman. And then I like the part later where, all three of them are corroborating, yeah, there was a guy with the hook, and we fought him off, and he ran away. And then, this is round 3 for this officer dealing with, Sam and Dean. So he's like, look, he's like, yeah, I know, we're leaving town. Then we kind of end the episode with, again, Sam's still not over Jessica. Dean's like, we can stay if you want. And he's like, no, let's get out of here. And so that's kind of where we leave our episode on that note. So we got a little bit of variations with like the Hookman. I mean, I think we've all heard like the legend of the Hookman, with the scratching on the roof of the car and everything. But like, what else do we know about there? Is there any real life connection?
So with the Hookman, it's going to be a lot like any other urban legend. It's kind of vaguely started. It can kind of be John Harold Brunfeld, who's a folklorist, kind of traces the Hook man's legends back to like the 1950s, and it has kind of existed since that period of time, with the first actually published work of it being done in a Dear Abby article in the 1960s.
So around the time when those teenagers were driving out to the middle of nowhere. I see. Go on.
But essentially, so the thought with the Hook Man is that it exists as a story of immorality or sexual promiscuity or premarital sex. Is you've got two different versions of the story. You've got what I call the happy version, and then you've got what I call the not so happy version.
Okay.
And so, but they all start the exact same way, which is going to be that you've got a couple decide that they're going to go someplace for a little bit of private time, and so they go to their local lover's lane, which is generally a secluded area where, teenagers go for necking and making out and other things. And while they're there, this is where kind of the story will start to diverge. Is while they're there for the happy ending, they start...
I was wondering if that phrase was going to get used at all.
For the, happy ending, the good ending, they start making out, whatever, and then suddenly there's like a scratching sound on the side of the car, and it freaks the girl out. Mm-hmm. Or they're just like out in the middle of nowhere, and so that kind of freaks the girl out. And so the guy turns the radio on to try and like set the mood, calm her down, whatever, and then we interrupt this broadcast for a special news bulletin. And it's a story about a serial killer who has a hook for a hand. Okay. And he has escaped from a maximum security prison and is running loose. This freaks both of them out, and so they start the car and they get out of Dodge. And as the boy goes to drop the girl off, he gets out of his car, and as he goes to her car door, notices that there is now a hook in the handle of the door.
Okay.
Sharing that they have just escaped death just barely by ending their promiscuity.
So the one with the happy ending is the one without the happy ending.
Exactly.
Gotcha.
Well, neither one of these actually ends in a happy ending. The final one, which is actually really similar to what we hear with the supernatural, which is ending in both of the teenagers dying, or at least one of the teenagers dying. In this instance, there are sometimes some clues that there's something wrong. Sometimes you hear the scraping on the top of the car, you'll hear the scraping along the side of the car, and so boyfriend gets out to go to investigate. As boyfriend gets out to go and investigate, he suddenly disappears, and more of that sound is heard. Eventually, this freaks the girl out, and she's discovered by a few motorists. The motorists come, and they open the door, and they tell her, "Don't look behind you, don't look behind you." And as she looks behind her, she sees her boyfriend hanging from a tree on top of the car, and sees the gruesome sight. Mm-hmm. Now, the one that my cousin told me, now this is the one that my first introduction to the Hook Man. It all goes very much the same way. Lover's lane, couple starts making out in the car, but then as they're there, there starts to be some weird noises, and so boyfriend gets out of the car to go look and see what's going on. He suddenly disappears. Girlfriend gets out and starts calling for him. She can't find him. She gets back in the car and locks the car. Just as she gets back from locking the car, she looks up to see this hideous man staring at her through the car window. She backs up into the back seat to try and get away, remembering that the car is still locked, and breathes a sigh of relief. But as she breathes that sigh of relief, this man holds up what is a hook for a hand, and attached for the hook is her boyfriend's head.
Yeah.
And in his other hands, he holds up the car keys. And then that's how the story ends. So essentially, this is just acting as a, don't go to Lover's Lane, you could die. And the Hook Man, for some reason, became the big connection to that. It's actually thought to be by a David Mickelson from Snoops, that this is actually based on the 1946 Texarkana murders, in which 8 people were attacked and 5 of them were killed, 3 of them severely hospitalized, but with all of them being couples. One of them actually did happen in an attack on Lover's Lane. Both of those individuals did survive. Another two, their bodies were found, so there's not really much of a connection to Lover's Lane, but the other two, their bodies were just found in the woods. And another couple were attacked in their homes, with the wife being able to survive, but the husband unfortunately dying. However, a hook was not used. Instead, it was a .32 caliber pistol that was used to commit the murders, and the killer was never found. Which is actually true. The killer was never found.
I guess, like, depending on what kind of hook you're using, it could look like a gun. Or
it's the hammer on the gun.
That's how you pull the trigger. You got to make a hook with your finger.
So there were actually, but as with all urban legends, you're not really supposed to win, but you're supposed to be scared. You're supposed to learn some sort of lesson from it. It's like the Bloody Mary. You know, you're not supposed to win against her. It's kind of like the Phantom Traveler, La Llorona. You're not supposed to win. You're supposed to get scared. You learn the lesson, and then you know not to be a bad child or to be a promiscuous teen or anything like that. But I mean, a lot of the Hookman have carried on in modern day horror films, because generally it's the promiscuous teenagers in horror films that are killed by Michael Myers in the woods, or are killed by Jason in the woods, or killed by the Candyman, who does use a hook for his hand. Now, this one, they're presenting it as a ghost, using salt, using iron, using all the other tropes that you need to take down a ghost. Those work just fine. But also, it's safe to assume that in the urban legends, it's just a dude.
Right.
So none of these teenagers happen to be armed during the course of their travels.
Sure. I'm noticing, like, on a lot of the beginning stuff, you know, we're dealing with more of the urban legends, and I feel like as we continue on, we're going to get more into, like, the creatures, like the monsters, where there's going to be
more mythology.
Or, like, a way to actually, like, stop it or kill it. Whereas, like, a lot of what we're dealing with right now has basically just been spirits taking on different tropes of urban legends.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. It is kind of interesting to have, like, a priest, like, you know, end up with a hook. Of all the things you're going to give somebody, I understand, like, you know, in modern days we have very sophisticated, if someone has lost a limb, we've got things far more sophisticated. But, I mean, to give a priest just a straight up, like a meat hook, I don't really see how that...
I mean, he may have just been given, like, the stump attachment, and then he, like, personally ordered the hook to go. Like, I'm just reminded of...
I think that's a church that I'd go to. I don't know that I want to go there anymore.
The movie Hook, where he's able to, like, detach it and then put on different attachments.
Yeah, that's good.
Like, he had, like, the baseball glove attachment.
Yeah.
Could be something like that, where he had, like, different attachments, and then he, like, went down to the silversmith and ordered, you know, I want a hook for killing.
I want a murder hook, please.
Coming right up, preacher.
So yeah, the urban legend of the Hook Man. This is actually one of my, that was one of the urban legends when I first heard about it. That's like one of the first urban legends I ever got to hear about. And so that was always one that I thought was really, really cool. Yeah. When it wasn't also terrifying me to no end because my cousin's a jerk.
Yeah, that version of it is, you know, adds in a little bit more of like that horror factor.
Yeah. So, and I believe the next one,
we're going to be actually looking into Native American curses.
All right.
So, well, it looks like the rain's starting to let up, so I guess we can get back on the road. So, buckle up, and until next time,
we got work to do.